Okay, I think the majority of people are back. So Steve, we're going to get started here.
Okay.
Both Steve and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to tell this story. Little known fact, Steve and I worked together back when I used to work at IBM. In fact, I was Steve's team leader at one point.
Indeed.
So Steve and I go way back. But we like to tell this story because, as we all know, IBM is securable, right? But the question really is it only IBM's responsibility to put out fixes and to give us the tools? Or is some responsibility our responsibility as the user community? Whose responsibility is it? So we like to talk about IBM security as a dual responsibility. So back when I was at IBM, Steve, there was a process that we had to go through whenever we put in a new feature of the operating system or had to make a major change. And it was a process where we had to document everything from if we were creating a new library or user profile or what our objects we're going to look at. There's always a security section in this process that we had to make sure to get by the security architects at the time. So IBM has been developed as a secure product or securable product for many, many, many years. But I kind of think that things might have changed in 26 years since I've been gone. So maybe you can explain what the development process looks like today.
Sure. Because things have changed, but some things have remained the same, right? You're all aware of the architectural elements that help us to create secure and securable software within the operating system, and then the stuff that you guys can write and secure on top of that, right? The fact that we have a machine interface, for example, that normal user programs can't get to, we still protect that with reviews such as the ones that Carol is talking about. If we're going to make a change to a machine interface instruction, or if we're going to add a new machine interface instruction, there are a set of questions that our developers have to be able to answer appropriately before we will let them go and implement that new thing. For example, you're going to add a new library. We need you to know, we need to know at the beginning, what authority is Star Public going to have to that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so all these things that were historically there because of the architecture are still there. Now, we don't go through the manual design review process we used to go through. We have a lot of templates people have to fill out. Things don't even get to the review process unless you have filled out your answers, etc. So that's good. That's a benefit that we've had because we've been able to create tools and templates as part of the development process in those, what did you say, 26 years. But there's also the case that IBM and the industry have placed new requirements on software that is being developed and sold to businesses. And so, in addition to what we've done for our own architectural elements, there are things that we have had to do to fit in. And yes, you've advanced the slide. IBM has created for all IBM software products in general, and for the products that run the systems in particular, like the IBM I operating system, called IBM Security and Privacy by Design, SPBD. So now, in addition to those architectural checks that we do, we also have a set of checks that we have to do so that we can pass these reviews that are monitored not just by the IBM I development team, but by the larger IBM security organization. And so we have to, for example, prove ahead of time that we're going to have penetration tests as part of the development. We have to be able to show what those penetration tests are going to be and how they're going to be done. Those were not part of our original architectural things, but they make sense for anything like IBMI that's going to be delivered. And so there's quite a rigorous set of rules we have to follow just to create the software that becomes the operating system. So that's kind of different than it used to be, but it's all to the benefit, I think, of our community. It doesn't take the place of what customers and partners have to do, but it provides a more stable foundation.
Right. And so a lot of those laws and regulations that Steve was alluding to and industry standards, we've just listed here as reference.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we all can take advantage of, and that Steve will be talking about and Guy just talked about, are some of the things that have been added in the last two releases, IBM 7.5 and 7.6. So if we look at those enhancements, many of them were done because IBM needed to adhere to that secure by design and secure by default. So in 7.5, for example, many objects that kind of escaped out the door at a higher public authority setting was reduced to the more appropriate setting of public use or public read. SQL has been made consistent. The results of running SQL has been made consistent with the running of the corresponding CL command, for example. So there are many new things that we're seeing from IBM, including 2 new defaults in 7.6 for different system values. Password level defaults now to 3, and the password rules also has new defaults. This is for new installs only, but it shows IBM's mindset of secure by design.
Yeah, before we head into
course,
MFA, yeah, and before we head into MFA, I definitely want to get there. Let me reinforce what longtime users of this platform will now be aware of. We used to, as AS400, and even early in the IBMI era, we used to value consistency from release to release as the most important thing. And so while we would guide people on how to secure their platform better, it's only been recently that because of security and privacy by design, because of the kinds of requirements that are placed on us by countries and regulatory agencies, that we have now factored secure by default as more important than consistency across releases. And as Carol said, you still only get these things by default when you do a new install, but we do actually encourage people to do new installs, or at least to read the security information to say, what does IBM make as settings for secure when you do a brand new installation, so that you can compare. And if there's any reason for you to be outside of that secure by default, you better really know why, because we changed the default for very good reasons. All right, and then multi-factor authentication, huge addition to our security toolbox in the 7.6 release.
So Steve, just so you know, Guy has just gone through a demo and explained the features of MFA.
Great.
Yep. So I think it's important, though, for all of us to understand why IBM had to do this and why it's in 7.6.
Okay. So let's spend a little time talking about MFA and where it came from into the operating system. So we're all well aware that applications that sit on top of any operating system, including IBM, have been implementing MFA for their applications for a long time. They didn't need us to have MFA embedded in the operating system to create a multi-factor authentication for your banking, for your retail, all the places we normally see MFA, right? So why did we need to put it within the operating system? Well, because the things that you can do if you are an authorized user to the actual operating system are very powerful. So we don't want somebody who has access as a programmer, a security officer, a system operator to be able to just change things, end things, just because they only have access to somebody's user ID password. Okay. We all recognize that when you are more powerful, you should also have more constraints on what it takes to authorize yourself. And so for years, we have said we would like to be able to put a multi-factor authentication anytime you are going to be accessing the system as a powerful user of one sort or another. Probably 5 years ago now, I went to all of our advisory councils, the Common Europe Advisory Council, the Common America's Advisory Council, the Large Users Group, and our ISV Advisory Council, and I laid out for them all the different things we could do in 7.6 that would require significant resources. And of all of those things, every single one of those user groups said the most valuable, especially in these countries and industries where security is preeminent. Okay, the most valuable thing you could do to IBM is to create an integrated multi-factor authentication tool so that we could protect the strongest users. Now, they also said we'd like to be able to select to do it for any user, because just because a user has a specific authority is not enough, right? We might know that we created a user profile who may not have security officer authority, but because by their nature of their job, they have to have access to a specific file, which is critical to the business, we want to make sure that person's profile is protected by MFA. And so, as you saw in the features of MFA, we didn't just create an integrated MFA that targeted specific authorities. We made it so that everybody could have, every user profile on the system could have MFA turned on for them if a business thought that that profile was worth protecting in that way. And of course, we made it so that you could do it to every user profile, but we wouldn't have that by default because as we talked to our advisors, they said many customers out there have users who don't need to go through that level. They don't have enough authority to do anything harmful. I question that, but that's what they said. So it wouldn't necessarily be a good idea to turn on the requirement for MFA for every single user all at once. That would be very disruptive. So we listened to what our advisors planned or had us plan. And then we also listened to the security community, the folks who do security products that help you secure your system, the people in the security advisor community like Carol, asking how can we make sure that when we do this, you also have the ability to add on the value that you have. So that's the kind of the why.
And I think it, And I think it's very important to note that only IBM could provide us with a 100% complete solution. As Guy said, there are vendors in this room, including my employer, that provides MFA solutions. But none of us have access to the authentication points that IBM does. So IBM was the only one that could enable it for the operating system itself, as well as for us as vendors, as Guy was saying, to add our own layer of MFA on top of or instead of the IBM option. So you can't see it, Steve's head is in the way, but I'm showing a pointer to the bottom row there where that says authentication exit point. This is the Navigator for I interface to configure MFA. One of the reasons I like the way that IBM configured MFA is that you have control over who and when MFA is configured. So you choose which users, you choose when those users are affected. It is you to roll it out in your time frame. And also how you do it. You can use the native IBM, again, which is free, or you can add on a different method. And so IBM has laid the groundwork for us. It is now up to us to take advantage of that very powerful feature. Okay, so moving on from MFA, we probably can all relate to vulnerabilities being discovered, I should say. Dominique talked earlier about Log4j and how it ruined many people's holidays several years ago. So Log4j was also a part of, was affected on IBM I. So the question really is, how does IBM respond when a vulnerability is discovered? So what happens internally, Steve, when a vulnerability is reported?
All right, so let's recognize that from the IBM I development and support point of view, there are really three different ways a vulnerability can come into us. The most common, though you probably won't notice it, is that we find something ourselves. So what will often happen is that we will get a vulnerability reported from the outside world. There are ethical hackers, there are bad hackers, but the ethical hackers will find something that somebody could exploit, and they will let us know before they make it public. We're going to tell people that this vulnerability exists. IBM, you should do something about it so that when we report it publicly, you have a remediation. You have an answer to it. You have a way to fix it, or at least to tell people how to avoid that vulnerability. Okay, so that's another way. It's not just internal. There's that, right? Well, when they tell us this and it becomes then a CVE, the clock starts as soon as we find out about it. Generally speaking, we have about 30 days to get something done, okay? And so it goes into the same CVE process that every other piece of software has their vulnerabilities reported against, and we have time then to fix it. Not very much, but we have some time. All right, so we appreciate it when people find vulnerabilities and they give us a forewarning that they are going to report this as a CVE, so we can start our clock at the same time as they're starting theirs. But every single one of those exposures then causes our security team, and often our database team, because the system is so tied to the database, to say, okay, if they found this, what are the characteristics of this CVE that we might be able to project exist in other parts of the operating system. And so we will have a group of people go off and look at related things. You told us that there's a vulnerability because this object has this authority and it could be misused in this way. Well, we internally go off and determine if there are others like that. And so that's why often the exposures that we have to deal with come from us inside. We'll take one of these and make a pattern out of it and then go look for that. So then we have these 30 days. We, of course, have to respond directly to the CVE and say, here's what you can do to get around it or to fix it. And then we will often create a CVE that represents a class of vulnerabilities that we also provide remediation for, a fix for, if possible, at the very same time, okay? Those are two of the ways, is a friendly person, a white hat person reporting CVEs to us and us responding, or us with what we know internally, finding things on our own. There's actually been quite a lot of work in our development organization over the last 3 years, closing some holes that we could find because of other holes that exist. The worst kind of CVE exposure is when somebody just goes out, finds something, and reports it without telling us ahead of time. And that's because if it's just somebody who is not very good at communication with us, it can take us a while to figure out, what did you really mean? What's behind this? How long has it been out there? So we really do appreciate when our community lets us know, helps us recreate the issue, because if we just find out about it through a bulletin board post or something, we're sort of behind. We weren't working with the person who is creating the CVE, but we still respond to it.
But then there are things like the open source CVEs that are out there as well. So the security architect has to take a look at those to see if any of those could apply to the open source that IBM ships, and has to respond to those as well. So this is just a link to the CVE program, and if you click on the lower one, it will show you the ones that are specific to IBM I proper. So the other thing that you can do for yourself is to maintain a software inventory. This is one of the ways that you know if one of the CVEs is going to affect you or not. Because as I mentioned, the open source, that IBM can tell us if open source that IBM ships has a vulnerability, but we all may have loaded a piece of open source code ourselves. And IBM has no knowledge of that. So they cannot tell us if it affects us or not. So we need to know what we have installed, and we need to do a regular scan of the CVEs ourselves to make sure that we don't have vulnerable code on our systems. Also, make sure that your vendor list is up to date. So if a vendor has a software issue, they know who to contact to make sure that they can tell you to update their software. And make sure that IBM I is in your incident response plan. All right. So if you have not signed up for IBM Alerts, this is the link to how to sign up for IBM Alerts. That will allow us to be alerted on not just IBM I, but you can choose other products within the IBM family to be alerted on. IBM has also provided us SQL services to let us know if we're current. So this is the SQL that allows us to know if we have current group PTFs, If there are defective PTFs on our system that have not been fixed with the corrected PTF, you want an empty list for this one, by the way. And if our firmware is current. Now, what happens is that when you run this SQL, it will do a call back to a website that IBM keeps current that shows what the current PTFs are. It does a comparison to your system and will let you know if there are issues to be resolved. So IBM has provided us with this tool. Again, it's our responsibility to keep our systems current. Now, there is an idea out there that will help us to have a better, more current and live stream of the CVE currency. So if you are into voting for ideas, here's one for you to take a look at.
Yeah, if I could pause for a moment while you have that up. The theme of this whole presentation is that there are things IBM can do, and then there are things that you need to do, and we're going to try to help you do those things. The services that Carol just ran through are things that, of course, you could have done them yourself. We're trying to make it easier for you, but we can't do it for you. And I suspect that the people who are at this particular conference are the people who know this is the right thing to do. What we need to do as security-minded professionals is get the message out to the people who didn't come to this conference. Because unfortunately, one of the things our community seems to think is, oh, I'm running on IBM i, IBM takes care of all of that for me. We need them to understand that we try to make it as easy as possible for them to take care of it, but there is some work that has to be done. And another aspect of that is, if you, especially as a security-minded professional, can think of a way that we can make it easier, please give us that idea. We may have thought of it, or we may not have. This is a great idea, and we are currently investigating how quickly could we get something like this out there, and through what tools, what mechanisms would we want it? And maybe I'll mention that again when we get to our wrap-up session.
Yes, thus the term securable.
Yes.
All right, so again, we have a responsibility. We need to be current. Past releases of the operating system, past releases of old client access, past releases of even ACS, the current client software, have vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities. By leaving those installed, we all are leaving those systems vulnerable. As Steve said, we need to get that message out to our clients, for those of us who are consultants, and for those of you who are administrators or security administrators, we need to get that message to our management so that they can understand why we need to keep the system and our client software up to date. We also need to get rid of old things on our systems. IBM did this a lot in 7.6, the most current release. They got rid of profiles that were shipping with the operating system that are no longer used. They took off the code that represented certain protocols that were no longer used. Why aren't they used? Because they're vulnerable. The communications community has done what's called deprecating those protocols. That means they're no longer in use because they're vulnerable. So I encourage you, I know Steve encourages you, Jesse encourages you to read the memo to users to find out everything that IBM did. And there are some of those things that you can do even on the earlier releases. to make your systems more secure. All right. So these are just some things that you can remove and also things that you can review on a regular basis. So here is a version of the white paper that goes along with this presentation. You can download it. But what are your final thoughts, Steve?
So I'm gonna tie a couple of things together here. First of all, we really appreciate the community and what you do for us, letting us know what you need, spreading the word. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. But we are about to head into an era where we have to deal with non-people doing things. I don't know what Jesse has talked about yet at this conference, but if he hasn't talked about agentic, talk to Jesse about agentic.
That will be tomorrow.
Super. We are, within IBMI, going to make it possible for AI entities, agents, autonomous things to find out information about the system, to perform operations on the system, because the world is going there. People are creating bots and agents that are going to try to make life better and simpler for humans. But when that happens, now we have a non-person who is going to use interfaces to get important information about the operations of the system, about the data that's in the system, etc. We have a responsibility as the operating system to make sure that when we provide these mechanisms to an AI, we're making it possible for the people who set up that AI to limit what the AI can do. But we can't just lock every AI out of every potential important thing. I can imagine, for example, an AI that is using this idea that Carol asked you to vote for to go and find CVEs that have been reported that we have PTFs for. All well and good. Make sure that your AI has the same authority as your security team or as your auditors so that they can find that out. But what's the next step that you take when you find out that you have a CVE that has a fix that is a PTF? Well, you are going to plan when are you going to apply that based on a bunch of knowledge you have. If you decide to give your AI agent the authority to apply the PTF when it finds out that there is such a thing, you better be careful about how much power you give it to do that thing. We have to assume that, like a real person, if it has the authority to start the PTF apply process, that's what you want to have done, right? So let's all get our mindset into protecting our system from actors like AIs that are going to try to do the right thing. But we need to make sure we have locked our system down and created those agents in a way that still has the business needs in mind, because I'm sure all of you do. Okay, so this is a final thought. The last time Carol and I did this, I had not yet spent as much time with my team thinking about how we're going to enable IBMI for agentic. Jesse will apparently talk about that some tomorrow, but we all need to be thinking about that because there will be non-people who have the authority of people, and who can do things much more quickly than we people can with much fewer restrictions unless we're careful about how we put it into play.
You would think that Steve and I are on the same wavelength, because that just fed right into both, I'm sure, Jesse's presentation as well as mine tomorrow. So thank you for that,
Okay.
Steve.
You bet.
Woo.
Go listen to these people. They are the smartest people in this in your room about these topics. Go. Yep.
So I will make these slides available via PDF if you would prefer, but these are just some general sites that you can go to for more information, for general security information, as well as more information about IBM security and other topics. So with that, I think we're done. We have 1 minute. Are there any questions that you can ask real fast?
Do you have any questions? No?
Oh, everybody is too shy in this room, Steve.
Or they're in the
That's
Q&A.
okay. You're going to get questions afterwards, and you know how to get to me if there's anything I need to answer.
Yes, that's true. All right, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
You bet. Have a great conference. Bye.